Bethan Winn is a speaker, facilitator, and author who helps people think better together. She's the founder of Human Skills Co., where she works with leaders and teams across business, government, and education to strengthen critical thinking, decision making, and communication. Her book, The Human Edge: Critical Thinking in the Age of AI, explores how we can use artificial intelligence without surrendering the judgment and agency that makes us human. Bethan, welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
So am I. It's a fascinating topic that you've got here. So, if critical thinking is how we exercise agency, what happens when we outsource it to AI?
Well, I think we're seeing that happening in real time, aren't we? There's a lot of outsourcing going on, and I suppose the main thing we need to be aware of is the muscles, if you like, that we use for thinking atrophying. And not just our thinking muscles, but our social muscles, our willingness to ask tricky questions muscles. Like if we always are turning to technology to do the hard things for us, then we're losing those skills and losing control over the outcomes and the outputs that we're getting as well. We all know we should be checking, but I'm sure we've all had moments when we haven't.
And then what are we left with?
I think that's the big existential question, isn't it? I mean, I'm very pro-human in all this. I believe in people and our ability to, like you say, have that agency to choose where we want to solve problems, where we want to put our energy. And it's interesting times because we do tend to also want convenience where possible. So I think we really need to make sure that we are being intentional about what we are using AI for and what we want to keep and get better at. Because the reality is, if you start using AI for anything, you are giving away opportunities to practice on a daily basis or hourly basis sometimes, depending how much people are using them.
And that's what you said, right? It's a muscle. We are atrophying these muscles if we're not using them. But not everybody is capitulating or outsourcing their thinking, right? I mean, some people can do it better. Do you think that AI has created the critical thinking problem, or do you think it arrived with the internet where, I mean, it trained people to stop critical thinking? I saw a comedian, and this comedian was talking about the ills of today with young people and the ills of society generally, and kept coming back to, we used to do that in the old days, but we called it critical thinking. And it's like, just stop and say, is this thing that I'm hearing actually what I believe, rather than repeating what has been said? So to circle back to my question, do you think that it was AI that's created the critical thinking problem, or has it arrived through the internet and social media and just more sharing of information? What's your take?
Well, there's a history here, isn't there? And if we go back 200 years, most people would just do as they were told because they didn't have access to other information. So, you know, your king or your leader or tribal elder, whatever, they were the font of all knowledge that you could access. And, you know, people couldn't read. It was quite common. Like, there was multiple reasons why you would just do as you were told. And, you know, if you didn't, you might end up with your head chopped off or similar, burnt at a stake somewhere. So as information has become more available to us over the last, 120 years or so, with radio, newspapers, print becomes cheaper, books more available, all that stuff. We, as humans in sort of wealthy societies at least, have had access to more and more information and more freedom to choose for ourselves what kind of food we want to eat, what kind of whether we want to engage in a war or not. We have a better understanding of a lot of things in the world, and we need to make our own opinion and judgment and our own rules for life. And while there's an amazing freedom with that, it does lean into individualism and, just doing you do you, which is amazing in some regards, but also there's a loss of community. And I could talk about that and loneliness for another half an hour. But we've had to sort of become more aware of critical thinking. We've had to try and develop those skills. So I wouldn't say the internet is the beginning of the end of critical thinking skills, but it's definitely changed the kind of skills we need. And it's never ending, the only constant is change. So while, gosh, 15 years ago in a classroom, I was showing my students how using keywords was the way to get the best from Google as opposed to a natural question. And these days, kids always ask natural questions to the search engines because the AI will write a natural language response. But it's harder and harder to get to the truth now. Just last week, Google announced they're incorporating more AI into their searches than less. And so just this morning, I had to scroll past sponsored links and AI summary and all kinds of stuff to get to what I was actually looking for.
Yeah.
And when convenience is king and speed and efficiency is very important in business in particular, that's where we take shortcuts. And with shortcuts, there's always a trade-off.
Yeah. It makes me think, you're not going to believe what I'm about to say. It makes me think about the Enlightenment, because one
Yeah.
of the biggest things that's happened to the human race has been the Enlightenment, which said, to your earlier point, kings are not, and perhaps the church is not the center of all
Mm.
knowledge, and everyone must fall back to it. And then so many other things that came out of that.
It's amazing when you track it back, isn't it?
It
Even
really is, and that was the genesis. And my worry is that in today's modern society, we're beginning to lose some of the importance of what the Enlightenment gave us, because that was an arc in human history that put us on a different trajectory.
yeah, yeah. And the things that are advancements in any capacity, there's things that we gain and things that we lose. And I think everyone I speak to is aware that there's this kind of nuance required to just navigating life these days. We know that we want to move and we want to be among trees and nature, and that's good for our bodies and good for our brains. And yet we anchor ourselves to screens for so many hours a day and then wonder why we feel a bit crap. So yeah, it's a bit off topic perhaps, but yeah, it's yeah, these are very interesting times, and I think we just need to try and take a step back every so often and say, do I like the habits I'm getting into? Do I like how much I'm using AI or what I'm outsourcing to AI? Cognitive sovereignty is there for the taking, but it's meaning like, controlling what we pay attention to. But it's so easy to just get caught up in what feels like everyone else is doing this, so I'm just going to do it too. So that's critical thinking in itself, really, isn't it? Being intentional about our decisions.
It is, and so much of agency comes from that, I think. So much of one's own ability to be an agent in their own world. So what do we get from AI? It's better answers, I think, to your point about we used to go searching for keywords, and now we're giving it full questions and we're getting much better answers. So, in the midst of that change that we're experiencing at the moment, how do we know if our own critical thinking is deteriorating? What are the flags, perhaps?
Okay, well, I'll just take a slight issue with, do we actually get better answers from AI? Yeah, quicker, perhaps fuller answers,
Yeah.
but not necessarily reliable, accurate answers. How do we know if we're losing it? I think a good test is to get out a blank piece of paper and set yourself a challenge, maybe something that you did a year or two ago, and see, are you still able to do that thing? There's definitely things where my husband is an AI enthusiast, and he'll be like, you got to do this, try it for that. And I'll give it a go. But then I think remembering that we can dial it back. For example, like meeting note takers, people are like, oh, this is amazing. This AI is going to take all the notes. And I'm like, no, because then you're not listening. So I've stopped using them, and I actually really don't like using them now, because it doesn't improve my listening. It doesn't mean I'm paying any better attention to what my client wants and needs. So yeah, scrap those. But to your question, yeah, I guess it's a good thing to just test yourself, test your patience and your diligence. Find a topic you're interested in, and go on a deep dive. Try and sit and read a book for 5 minutes. See how you
Yeah.
feel. We're
It,
so conditioned for convenience and speed. It's crazy.
it's so funny because we're both authors of business books, and we I can only assume it's taken years, like it has for me, for a book. It is born of lots and lots and lots of critical thinking and analysis, and I'm sure there's ways to shortcut that now, but that's the way that I've done it.
Yeah.
And 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 I'm at this juncture where I think, but are people not actually going to be reading books into the future? And what does that mean? And if it sounds so unique, perhaps for you to say, just read a book, just read for 20 minutes, and it's like that'd be something that's remarkable to try.
Mm.
It really makes you think, like, how do we keep these mind muscles limbic, how do we keep them active? It's a real challenge for us, right?
It can be. Yeah, it depends on the context. And I think this is where academia gets a bashing, but actually, if you're having to write a 10,000 word essay where you've done the research, it does force you to do that. And that, I think we forget sometimes, that writing an essay is not about producing the words, it's about the thinking process that goes into it. The reality is, for most people that are not in academia, there's that pressure for make a decision, do this, do this, do this. So having processes in place, having, questions that you try and ask before you go ahead with something is a really good way to just keep that practice going. And not just doing that by yourself, because similarly to when you talk to AI, we're very good at convincing ourselves that we are correct in our thinking. So having a sounding board, or even, I'm a big advocate for using AI not just to answer your questions, but to question your answers. So say to it, challenge me on this. Where are my blind spots? So rather than you outsourcing your thinking, you're getting it to help you think things through more thoroughly. So there's a case for that. I think that's a very good use case for AI. So looking at things from different angles. Edward de Bono's Six Thinking Hats was really big in the 90s. I have a version of that that's updated, but if you tend to pessimism, then saying, okay, what's the best case scenario, or vice versa. If you're a details person, challenge yourself to think big. A lot of it is just asking questions and taking the time to really think that through.
This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan to build the business that you want and the life that you want. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. And you can also check out our books, Made to Thrive, which is about the 5 roles of a CEO, becoming a great CEO rather than just a good CEO in your business. Second is Onboarded, which is about hiring and onboarding great people, making sure that you give yourself the greatest chance for people to succeed in your organization. And then third is Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better, which is about building a business that is better rather than bigger. It's not about building a little business. It's about building a business that compounds, a business that you can actually fall in love with again. I think underlying one of the things that we can easily forget is that there are commercial incentives and models from the companies who own these AI companies that are
Mm.
driving the responses that we're getting as well. We can look at it to be a fountain of knowledge, perhaps, but in actual fact, some of the phrases and the wordings and the reactions are actually designed with commercial incentives, both from the AI and from the owners of the AI companies.
Mm. Yeah, people talk about how sycophantic ChatGPT and Claude can be, and you say, hang on a minute, we love a compliment and we
Yeah.
connect over compliments quite often, and so it's very clever and intentional for your response is to go, hey, what a great idea. I love your thinking on that. Tell me more. You know,
Yeah.
it's what we want from our fellow human beings and often don't get because everyone's busy and on to the next thing. So it's very intentional and very clever. And that's why people turn to AI over a real human being to have some difficult conversations, or talk through something emotional or whatever it may be. It's very good at that.
Oh, yeah. What do you think is the difference between good critical thinking and intelligence?
Oh, good question. I guess the two come hand in hand. I think to me, critical thinking requires, well, I often explain it as its skills, its knowledge, and its attitudes. So skills like evaluation, analysis, and judgment, knowledge of biases and logic and things like that, and then attitudes like humility, courage being very important. So I suppose if critical thinking is something that you can apply to different areas and work really well, just because someone's intelligent, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to think critically. And I found it quite useful to hear Daniel Kahneman, who was behind a lot of work on behavioral economy and got a Nobel Prize for his work in this space, and him saying, I'm also biased.
Yeah.
So we would like to think that everyone intelligent is also a good critical thinker, but it's not necessarily the case.
Because being intelligent could mean that we're actually just better at reinforcing or convincing ourselves that we're right about what we think we're right about, which is a completely different skill set.
Indeed, indeed. So I suppose, ideally, someone intelligent, it depends how we're defining that intelligence, though. If we're talking about, how well did you do on a test or whatever it might be. But think it's often attributed to Einstein, one of those quotes, but, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Yeah.
There's different kinds of intelligence. Someone might be incredibly emotionally intelligent, but then, I don't know, crap at maths. Does that mean they're not smart? I think I saw just this morning a quote Stephen Bartlett put up about if maybe the measure of intelligence should be your ability to create the life that you want. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's a bit of a challenge because there's plenty of smart people out there that don't get the life they want.
I mean, it's hilarious in a way for me because that's a quote that we regularly use with the people that we work with, which is, if you're so smart, why don't you have the life that you want?
Yeah, okay, interesting.
Yeah, and it's like, well, then you need to apply that smart to, build the life that you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so you spoke about AI being a sycophant, always saying yes. And I wanted to go back and maybe just scratch that itch a little bit more because you've discussed evidence where it can change entrenched minds better than another person can.
Mm,
So
mm,
it can be both a sycophant, but it can be very good at changing an entrenched mind.
mm.
I suppose my question is, how can it do both? But that's I don't know if that's really the question because it's how do we get it to do a better job, perhaps?
Mm. Okay, well, I know I forget exactly where the research was done, but there is research that showed AI was better at changing the minds of conspiracy theorists through a particularly, a setup experiment model. And one of the theories is that with AI, you're more likely to be honest than you are with another human being about
Yeah.
what you're thinking. And I've found that myself sometimes. I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I can say this to this person, but you can say it to AI because you're not going to get judged. You're not going to lose face with another human being. So all the evidence suggests that the best person to change your mind is yourself. Other people, throwing stats at you and telling you you're wrong is not going to work. Whereas, being honest, which is obviously the first hurdle if you're going to, change somebody's mind, but being honest about what you actually think and then getting AI to question you and say, okay, which bits are true, which bits are logical, which bits are relevant, maybe which bits are helpful, can be really good to make you think through your answers. So this is where I was saying, like, it's a really good use case to get it to question you. Most AI models are not set up to do that from the get-go, but you can go in the same way that you can say, stop being sycophantic
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
settings. I want you to challenge me. You can also say, I would like you to question me, or even just in the prompt, right? I always say something along the lines of like, ask me some questions to help clarify what we're trying to achieve here. And it does, and it's great.
Where do you get frustrated by your usage with AI?
Uh, Good question. I think when it overpromises and underdelivers. And I use Claude the most. I try and chop and change, not get too reliant on anything, but it definitely has the thing of before a new model comes out, it'll suddenly become not as good at doing certain things, and you're like, you
Yeah.
did this great last week, why are you doing so crap this week? So that can be frustrating. And yeah, just when it doesn't stick to, so if I use it to write anything like a proposal, I'll often get it to do a draft for me. And no matter how many times I've said don't use American English, I still have to go in and get rid of the Z's.
Yeah. 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 That's
Again, it forces me to actually engage with it. So in some ways, I'm like, oh, that's good. It's good that I'm doing that, and checking. You end up checking everything because you're in there checking it properly. But I think in terms of how I see other people using it, I say to people all the time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And people say, oh, I'll get it to answer my emails because that's quite a low value, easy task. But the number of times someone sent me an email and it's, insert name is still there, or same with like LinkedIn posts and things like that. I'm like, no, don't use it for that. That's the impression that people get of you. And yeah, it's not great. You're not a robot. Stop it.
yeah. It's a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
We see it do something. We see it do something really, really well,
Mm,
and then we keep chasing that, and then you can kind of look at the time and you think, oh, what would have taken me 30 minutes has now actually taken me an hour and 30 minutes or whatever it is because
mm,
I've been trying to chase that great answer once again that I got previously,
mm.
but I've needed to do all of this continual searching. It's
Yeah.
a fascinating time of change, that's for sure. I want to change gears to leadership and
Hmm.
critical thinking in the context of leadership and followership.
Hmm.
So, leaders complain often that every decision comes back to them, but what's happening often is that they're answering every difficult question themselves. So, when they're doing that, do you think that they're actually training people not to think?
Absolutely. Well, they're just training people to keep doing the same thing. And while humans and, I don't know, dogs are very different, I wouldn't want to confuse the two. It's like complaining that your dog jumps up to grab food from the table, but still feeding it food every time it does that. So we need to be cautious of saying, oh, it's them, they're the problem. It's like, no, what's your part in the mess? And usually, on questioning, a lot of leaders will say, yeah, actually, I do need to start doing that. But it's the classic, because we're good at our jobs, we get work done, we're competent, we've been promoted, and now we have this whole new level, new devil, which I can see you nodding. It's just a classic story. But the new stuff is scary and it's hard, and the more senior you get, the less likely you are to get the right answer. So I see people kind of hiding in the weeds, going back and doing the stuff that's easy and makes them feel good, and they can tick it off the list because the top is messy, and the more strategic and long term you are required to think, the more risk there is, the more uncomfortable it is. So it's such a common pattern, and it can take years, and some people never get there, to let go of the short term and operational bits that they were really good at to start with.
So what's the antidote? How do we get, when we've trained people who report to us to not exercise critical thinking, how do we begin to reverse that?
Well, I think if you consider critical thinking as how to think, not what to think, so getting that leader to either start using a process, because there might not be,
Yeah.
or figure out what their process is and explain that to the person, and coach them through that particular process. It might not be the process that person wants to use, but it's something to get them started. So often I will work with teams where, they're kind of succession planning. They're thinking, okay, we want these guys to eventually be the senior leaders. We need to get them thinking more, thinking better, and give them some tools and frameworks to do that. So I can give you a very quick one.
Please.
So I have the point model, which is very popular, particularly in big organizations, but it can work anywhere. So we've got permission. So first of all, clarifying who is meant to make the decision. Can I own it? A lot of leaders are like, oh, I just want people to step up. It's like, well, they need permission to do that too. Then we zoom out. So look at the bigger picture. What's the strategy and the vision? Zoom in. So what are the details? Data-driven decision making is quite the buzzword these days, but I love a recent flip I heard on that is like decision-driven data collection. So thinking in advance, okay, what decision will we need to make? So what information do we need to do that? But there's the data piece. And then the N is the noise. So what's interfering with the clarity of my thinking? So where am I being biased? What assumptions have I made? Is there squeaky wheels here? Whether that's kind of my own thing or someone else just literally like, do this for me now. And then the T is for test or take action. So what's a reversible, less consequential way that we can like just move things forward? A lot of particularly emerging leaders, younger leaders, anxiety is rife. Some stats say like 40% of Gen Z are anxious most of the time. So that test is that permission to do something. And I love the phrase action is the antidote to anxiety. So rather than overthinking it, just a nibble rather
A little
than
go.
yeah, just give it a go. Yeah, a little way forwards.
Awesome. Um, I think I think that the permission to pause and think in our world is not granted often enough, and I try to exercise that. And I didn't learn that from myself; I learned that from others. And
Yes.
so I pause and I think. Um,
Yes.
we often
Couldn't
yeah, we often reward people for following the process, and I'm kind of drifting a thread, I guess, through the last two questions and your answers there. We reward people for following the process, and then we promote them and expect judgment.
Yes.
They're different skill sets, right? What have we failed to develop through that promotion, do you think, or through that next level?
Well, I suppose this is where leadership development's really important, isn't it? Or whether that's provided internally by the company or someone, taking agency, going and doing their own reading. There's so much out there that you can access for free. And I know I've been in workplaces where no one's paying for your training anytime soon. So you just have to do your own. Look, it's something that we're aware of, particularly in sort of Western societies, that starts from about the age 5 or 6. Why is the peak why is meant to be about age 4. Whereas as soon as kids get into formal education, they stop asking as many questions, and they're rewarded by getting the right answer, not by showing their thinking quite often. And that goes throughout, and I've been a high school teacher, and you're a good teacher if you get good grades. And so you teach to the test and show them how to pass the test and do well. And that now goes through to university because they want, students want things scaffolded. They want to know the correct answer, which is fair enough because that's what they're rewarded for. But when people get to the workplace and things are messy and humans are unpredictable and all that stuff, a lot of young people really struggle. And then obviously, like you're saying, that next level is, oh, now we expect you to think a bit more for yourself. It's like, oh, hang on, I've never really done this. So it's hard and it's scary. And if you're in a place that penalizes mistakes, then you're even less likely to try something different. Is it Sir Ken Robinson? If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. So, on the one hand, we're like, yay, innovation, try new things, but also don't screw it up and don't make any expensive mistakes. And we're going to fire you if you do it really badly.
Yeah, it's such a struggle in my observation where there are a lot of people who just don't want to step up into leadership. They just don't want. Um, I find it remarkable because, and I don't think it's just our cohort. We work with a lot of different teams and businesses, and
Mm,
I just find it fascinating that people feel that they want to stay where they are and not evolve beyond a process driven day to day job and
mm.
into one where they can exercise autonomy, agency, and judgment.
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot on intergenerational communication recently, and there's some stats from Deloitte. The percentage of Gen Z, sort of current kind of young professional group that want leadership is tiny, like it's like 4% or something. But they are hungry to learn and develop. So it's not that they don't want to evolve and learn, um, but I often sort of challenge, typically as kind of Gen X, for example, in the room and say, well, what are you showing them that leadership looks like? Because if it looks like burnout, stress, illness, carrying responsibility and wearing it heavily and that impacting every other aspect of your life, I don't want that. That sounds rubbish, you know. So yeah, we need to think about, well, what do we make leadership look like for young people? Some of it might also be the age and the stage that they're in. I think we forget that. I know when
Yeah,
I was in my 20s, I was like, I don't want to be in a senior leadership role. I want to do my hobbies. I want to see my friends. I want to have fun.
yeah.
And then there's this shift that happens as you get older, isn't there? You kind of
You
become a
get
little,
older.
well, you're less egocentric, right? You go,
Yes.
there's joy from helping other people. There's joy from having an impact on the world. There's joy from, I don't know, supporting others' development and growth. And I think to expect someone who's, I don't know, 24, 25 to be like, yes, I want all the responsibility in the world. It's like, no, go party because, young people are also developing later. They're getting their freedoms later. They're not leaving home until they're older because they can't get on the housing market, all this kind of stuff. 25 is the new 18. They're still kids.
I,
Not
I
all of
I
them, but it's a bit of a pattern.
love the way that you've put that, where we become less egocentric, and that is the catalyst for unlocking leadership. Which is not to be accusatory, but it's just to say it's an evolution of one's self. And
Mm,
as we do that, we begin to look for the growth in others as a reward in life, and that
mm.
is where the leadership predominantly comes from. And in my experience, that's where the best leaders come from.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But giving people time to want to get there as opposed to forcing them, I think can be, because if you force someone into leadership that's not ready or not really committed to it, they're not going to do well. And so, once bitten, twice shy, you end up with someone sort of going, oh, can I take a step back? Can I go back to what I was doing before? But then there's a lot of baggage that comes with that around failure and, ego and all sorts of things. So, but it's challenging because, you're looking around going, well, these guys are going to retire soon. Who's coming next? And more and more people questioning, is that the life that I want for me? Is that really where my passion lies?
Yeah.
So getting the right people in, it's difficult. Yeah.
Do you think that can a leadership team think critically if disagreeing with the boss feels dangerous?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I mean, they can think critically, but whether they voice those opinions, yeah, yeah. Do you know what some of my early training? So I've been doing corporate training for about
Yeah.
6 years
Yeah.
since leaving the classroom, and I worked for AIMWA, and used to run, a day on critical thinking skills, and people would come from all different places. And I distinctly remember at the end of one day, a young man being like, "This has been great. I'm so inspired, but what do I do when I go back to the office and my boss just says, no, 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 because that's what my boss does?" And I was a bit like, oh man, I don't know. There are things that we can do to obviously support ourselves in those situations, and reframe. But ultimately, if you are stuck with that, and you're just going to get frustrated. So it's worth thinking, okay, what are the options here? Apply the critical thinking to other parts of life if it's not going to work at work.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I wish there was a good answer. Not to
Yeah.
say that yours isn't a good answer, but just to say, I think it's situational. It's situation dependent per se, but maybe good critical thinking and becoming better at critical thinking will illuminate the path.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll open things up, I love the Wizziati, what you see is all there is, one of Daniel Kahneman's acronyms. And you might look at that and say, okay, my options are put up and shut up or leave. And the reality is there are multiple myriad other options out there that we're not seeing right now. And yet we tend to focus on, what's directly in front of us. So yeah, there's it's messy, it's situational, it's people. You might think, oh, they're never going to change, but you never know. They might change overnight, and you'll be very surprised when they do. So, um, yeah, expecting people to magically change is not a good thing to hope for in life, but knowing that things change, things evolve. You never know what's
Yeah,
going to happen tomorrow, and that's the reality of life as well, right?
it sure is. I want to ask you about good decisions, bad decisions, and what leads to bad outcomes. And
Mm.
so leaders can't have all of the information to make the optimal decision. Like at some point we've got to decide, how do you know when you've got enough information to make a good decision? Because the risk is that we don't have enough information, we make a decision that leads to a bad outcome, but that is fed by not enough data or not knowing that we've got enough data.
Mm. Well, I suppose once again, it's quite nuanced and situational, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I suppose, you'd want to be looking at the risks with that. The majority of people I work with, it's not life and death. So, I often have that as a matrix. How reversible is it? How consequential is it? And the really irreversible consequential stuff is that. Whereas, if you're, I don't know, in the marketing department or something, then you're not making those choices. So then saying, okay, what risk are we willing to sit with? On my decision dice, one of the questions is, what's the worst case scenario and can you live with it? So it's worth asking that occasionally and go, okay, if this really went to shit, excuse my language, then can we cope with that? So a pre-mortem is a really good approach. I think Gary Klein is credited with coming up with that. But instead of waiting for stuff to go wrong and saying, okay, why did it go wrong, as a post-mortem, pre-mortem and sitting down going, okay, if this happened, what would we do? How can we mitigate against it? So just thinking ahead a little bit. We'll never truly know what the secondary and tertiary outcomes will be, but at least if someone says, why did you do that? You can point to a process and say, here's the questions that we asked.
Yeah.
This is what we had at the time. And I think, we need to give ourselves grace that, we can only make the best decisions we can with what we've got at that time. And as hindsight's great, but you need to have done it to do that.
Yeah, to get the best that you can.
Yes, exactly. And look, if the company values are, safety and risk aversion, then you're going to get certain results and it's going to be very stagnant. If the company values innovation or says they do, then there's going to be mistakes. That is the nature of innovation.
Yeah.
Challenge things and you have to screw up sometimes.
What is a book that has impacted you or a book that you would recommend to our audience?
Oh, right. So here's one I prepared earlier. It still has a sticker on it saying, read me, I'm really good. This is Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, who is a British author and writer. Journalist, that's the word I was looking for. It's a couple of years old now, but I think it's just really useful to create awareness around the attention economy and how valuable our attention is. Monetary value to companies, but then also valuable to us to solve the problems that we care about. So I love that one. I've read it 2 or 3 times through. I think the challenge is there, right? It's a book that is about attention, so you have to sit and read it. That's a really good book.
Very good. And how can people learn more about you and the work that you do?
If I'm being professional, I'm on LinkedIn. If I'm being less professional, I'm on Instagram.
So the fun is on Instagram, right?
Oh, look, as I said, I don't use AI to write my social media content, so there's a bit of personality still in the LinkedIn stuff.
Awesome.
My website, bethanwinn.com.au, and speaking at conferences and events all over Australia over the next 6 months, so maybe we'll cross paths there too.
Fabulous. We'll put those links in the show notes. What haven't we covered off that you wanted to cover off today?
Gosh, it's been pretty far-ranging, hasn't it? Oh man, what a question. We didn't talk about running.
Yes, we didn't. We spoke about that before we hit record. My apologies to the audience there. That was a crack. So you ran the Cape to Cape, am I right to believe that?
I do it as a team. I've done it a few years in a row now, doing the Margaret River Ultra. So that's beautiful on the Cape to Cape track.
How far is that for context for the audience?
Oh gosh, the whole track is 120k, I think. But the ultra, they do 80k on the Saturday, and then they do a marathon on the Sunday coming the other way. So beautiful event. Sells out very quickly, unfortunately. So
are you running all of that, or are you in a tag team?
No, we do tag team. There's a lot of sand though, a lot of soft sand.
Yeah.
How about yourself? Have you got any races coming up? Or
I do not. I do it for the enjoyment. And what was the quote that you said before? Something like I'm going to misrepresent it. It was something like in human selection, this we won't send this person to the psychologist. We'll make them a runner. Something like that.
Yes, this one won't go to therapy, so we need them running. There's a lot to be said for the kind of topics you can cover by yourself or with a friend in an hour-long run on a Sunday morning and a coffee afterwards. So, yes.
Yeah, no, love the running. And so to pay respect, one step back, is there anything that we haven't covered off beyond running that you wanted to cover off?
Oh, I think we've covered some great stuff. I suppose my invitation is always to think for yourself, because that's how you're going to get confidence and clarity. So not outsourcing, not just to AI, but to consultants and things like that. I think our gut feel is much better than we think it is at giving us guiding us to what we actually want as opposed to what we're told we should want in life. So, yeah.
What a beautiful way to close. Thank you, Bethan, so much for sharing your wisdom today. It's been a great conversation on, frankly, a timely and interesting topic for many of us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.